All right, let's just dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to look at the foundation of the United States government, but through a completely different lens. So often we're taught to look at the U.S. Constitution as just this dusty, boring rulebook, like just a list of things the government can and can't do. But today, we're going to reframe that entirely. The Constitution isn't just a rulebook at all. It's actually a highly specific cure to a very real historical disease. It is a direct response to a painful past. And I promise you, when we look at it this way, the history is going to suddenly come alive.
So, here's our quick roadmap for today's journey. First, fixing unfair government practices. Second, diagnosing the king's abuses. Third, the constitutional cure. Fourth, protecting rights and freedoms. And finally, education, morality, and peace.
Okay, Part 1. Fixing unfair government practices.
Let's introduce our very first major concept here. When we think of the American Revolution, we usually picture the whole shebang, right? The dramatic battles, tea getting tossed into the harbor, a really dramatic breakup with England. But the big idea here is that the revolution wasn't just about breaking away for the sake of independence. It was actually incredibly practical. The colonists were living under a system that was deeply, fundamentally broken. Their core motivation was to fix the totally unfair government practices that they were suffering under every single day. They just wanted a system that actually worked for the people living in it.
And there was a profound moral foundation to this desire for change. Take a listen to this passage from Isaiah chapter 1, verse 17. It says, "Learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed." This really gives us the ultimate moral why before we even get into the historical what. The founders and the colonists, they weren't just annoyed about taxes. They felt this absolute moral imperative to seek justice and to defend their communities from genuine oppression. Seeking justice was literally the driving force behind everything they were doing.
Moving right along to Part 2, diagnosing the king's abuses.
Now, what's genuinely fascinating here is how incredibly systematic the colonists were. I want you to think of them almost like doctors examining a sick patient. And King George III's actions, that was the disease ravaging the colonies. Just think about this number for a second, 27. The Declaration of Independence is super famous for its grand opening statements, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. But the bulk of that document is actually an itemized receipt. It lists exactly 27 highly specific grievances against King George III. They didn't just complain vaguely that things were bad, they meticulously diagnosed exactly where the disease of tyranny was showing its symptoms.
Actually, let's pause and make sure our foundation is completely solid here. What exactly is a grievance? A grievance is a formal complaint about an unfair act, an abuse of power, or an unjust law. So this wasn't just some petty, everyday disagreement, no way. These were formal declarations that the Crown was fundamentally violating the basic, everyday rights of the people. So if tyranny was the disease, what were the primary symptoms? Well, the 27 grievances basically boil down to a few major categories. First off, unfair laws that penalize the colonists without any of their input. Second, a complete lack of representation, meaning they had absolutely zero voice in the decisions that affected their lives, their families, and their businesses. And third, severe abuses of executive power. Basically, the king simply did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, completely regardless of the consequences to the people. His overreach made daily life absolutely intolerable. Which brings us to Part 3, the constitutional cure. Let's shift our energy from the disease to the prescription. The Constitution wasn't written in a vacuum. It was designed as a direct, specific remedy. Let me ask you this, and I want you to really think about it like a giant historical puzzle. What happens when the king simply dissolves your local legislatures? Because that was one of the major complaints. Whenever colonial leaders disagreed with the king, he would just dissolve their representative bodies. He'd shut down their local governments entirely. Imagine the total chaos and helplessness of having your only local voice silenced instantly by a guy sitting thousands of miles away. How do you fix a problem like that?
Well, the crucial point is how they reacted. The grievance was the king dissolving legislatures. The brilliant cure? The Constitution guarantees that Congress can only be dissolved by its own rules. That's it. The executive branch, meaning the president, cannot simply fire Congress and send everyone home just because they're having an argument. The founders took the exact pain point they suffered under the king and engineered a structural cure to make it absolutely impossible in the new government.
All right, let's try another one. This is probably the most famous grievance in all of American history. How did they fix taxation without representation? The colonists were furious, and rightly so, that their wealth was being extracted by a government that refused to let them have a seat at the table. So what's the specific constitutional fix for that? This just brilliantly illustrates the founders' logic. The grievance: taxation without representation. The cure? The Constitution guarantees that citizens elect the members of Congress, and it is specifically that elected Congress that has the power to control taxes. They didn't get rid of taxes entirely, right? Obviously, governments need funding to operate. But the remedy was ensuring that the people holding the purse strings are directly hired and fired by the citizens themselves through elections. Game changer.
Let's head into part 4, protecting rights and freedoms.
So we've seen how the founders fixed the big, structural rules of government, but they also had to protect individual, everyday liberties. Think about the absolutely terrifying reality of the king's rigged courtrooms. Another massive grievance they had was that colonists were constantly subjected to unfair trials. Sometimes they were literally shipped all the way off to England for a trial away from their peers or judged by magistrates who answered to nobody but the king. How on earth do you protect the accused from a system completely rigged against them?
Well, look at the solution they came up with here. The grievance of unfair trials was cured by the Bill of Rights, which explicitly guarantees a trial by an impartial jury and mandates due process of law. This specific prescription ensured that the government couldn't just lock you away on a whim anymore. The power to judge guilt or innocence was taken completely out of the hands of a single ruler and placed securely into the hands of ordinary citizens sitting on a jury.
Okay, here's another puzzle for you. The colonists had this deep, profound fear of the king keeping a standing army right in their towns during peacetime. Soldiers could just be quartered in their homes and used to intimidate the local population. So when they were designing a brand new nation, who should control the military spending and power to prevent that kind of military tyranny?
The cure to the threat of a standing army was to slice that military power right down the middle. The Constitution actually mandates that Congress, again, the representatives of the people, controls the military funding. But the president acts as the commander-in-chief who commands the troops. By separating the wallet from the sword, they completely cured the threat of military tyranny. Neither branch can abuse the military without the full cooperation of the other. It's a brilliant balancing act.
And that brings us to our final section, Part 5, Education, Morality, and Peace.
Let's bring this explainer home and transition a bit from historical solutions to our own modern lives. I want to pause here and ask a sort of synthesis question to really lock in the larger meaning of the historical puzzle we've just been solving together. Why is it so incredibly important to actually link these colonial grievances directly to their constitutional remedies? Like, why not just memorize the Constitution on its own and call it a day?
The answer is because history directly shapes our lawmaking. Recognizing these direct connections proves that the Constitution isn't just some random assortment of good ideas someone jotted down. It is a living, breathing document shaped directly by real historical pain. When we understand the profound problems the founders faced, the brilliant solutions they designed make perfect, logical sense. It completely changes the way we view our own civic duty today.
And you know, this perfectly aligns with a really powerful philosophy championed by the HeroesMart Academy Godly Learner series. They take this exact concept of learning from the past and apply it directly to our personal development. They teach a 3-step approach. Step 1, gain education. Step 2, intertwine biblical morality. Step 3, avoid choices that hurt. The philosophy here is that education without morality, well, it's ultimately going to hurt you. Think about it. What's the point of being super smart and supposedly educated if you just keep making bad choices that hurt yourself and the people around you? Just as the founders intertwine their education and governance with a deep moral desire for justice, we have to intertwine our own smarts with strong morality to make good protective choices in our lives.
And the ultimate reward for that kind of grounded moral education, it's peace. Romans chapter 8, verses 6 through 7 promises peace of mind to everyone who keeps their mind spiritual. When we align our education with really strong moral principles, true peace of mind is the ultimate reward. That is the lived experience of so many people who engage deeply with these exact concepts.
So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought to take with you. We've seen exactly how brilliant minds used education and a burning desire for justice to craft a constitution that cured a whole nation's historical grievances. So, looking at your own journey right now, what moral choices will you make today to cure the grievances in your own life? Thank you so much for joining me today, and hey, keep seeking justice.